So it's now my pleasure to have you, Thomas, here on stage. And something is telling me that many of our audience are very much interested in potential impact of the new supply chain law. And having you here as a partner from Clifford, I also got the feeling that you might have an answer here that's very relevant. So the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, David and TUM, for inviting me to this event. It's really great to be here and to discuss sustainable supply chains with people from all over the world, because it's a cross-border topic. You know, for me as a lawyer specializing in regulatory law and compliance issues, it is really fascinating to see how quickly the topic of sustainability in supply chains has gained momentum amongst lawmakers. In my view, the starting shot was the adoption of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, more or less exactly 10 years ago. This is just a set of recommendations. It is soft law. It is not binding hard law, but it has triggered an impressive legislative activity. As most of you know, several countries have already adopted laws to make supply chains more sustainable. It started with transparency provisions, which require ESG-related disclosures. But the transparency is not an aim in itself. It shall rather raise awareness for ESG-related or sustainability-related topics. And by raising awareness, it shall then also trigger activity within companies to foster these topics and to try to achieve more sustainability throughout their own group, but also their supply chains. But in the meantime, the lawmakers have gone a big step further, I'd say. For example, Germany, and you just mentioned it, David, Germany will likely adopt a so-called Due Diligence in Supply Chains Act within the next few weeks. Actually, the parliamentary hearing and adoption was scheduled for this week. It just has been delayed a little bit, but I'm pretty sure that this law will still make it through Parliament before summer. Moreover, the European Commission intends to submit a draft law on mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence requirements in corporate groups and supply chains. All these provisions shall make supply chains more sustainable by assessing risks for human rights, the environment, and so on and so forth. And of course, by tackling these risks, by avoiding them or by compensating for damages that have occurred. The scope and reach of all these provisions, of course, differs. For example, the German law is addressed to German companies of a special size. It primarily focuses on human rights and only accidentally, I'd say, on environmental issues. And it also takes into account primarily first-tier suppliers and not the whole supply chain. The European Commission has at least announced that it wants to go further. It wants to address its rules to all companies that are active on the European market, not only companies which are registered within the European Union, also third country companies. It also announced that it wants to include human rights and environmental issues, and it wants to have assessed these risks throughout the whole supply chain, not with regard to tier 1 suppliers only. So you see, huge activity is in place, and to me, this is, as I said, this is a fascinating development, and it will, of course, make supply chains more sustainable because companies will be required to take care of the sustainability of their supply chains and their subsidiaries. But it will also be interesting to see whether this will also affect the structure of the supply chains. So does it mean that companies then try to integrate more of their suppliers vertically and get them in-house, or which would not be ideal in my view, at least for suppliers in developing countries, or will it leave the structure of the supply chains unchanged, but make them more sustainable and more secure? Thank you very much for my time.
Thank you very much for your insightful answer, Thomas. And I have to say, what I really like about it, for everyone. So Thomas is a lawyer, right? But the way you talk about how it could affect supply chains, this is actually the way that we like to think about it. Like, will it be leading to more integration? How will the structure of supply chains change? And I'm absolutely in agreement with you that I would say, hopefully it will not happen that some suppliers are completely cut out, but rather that motivation will be giving for them to catch up and deliver up to the standards that we deem to be correct. And I think we will be talking a bit more about this law, about the implications, also how strong a motivator this can be for firms later on in the panel. So thank you very much for sharing your knowledge on this question.